He lunged at her in a drunken fury, snarling threats, but Jasmine didn't flinch. With one swift move, she deflected his attack and pinned him to the pavement, calm and unshaken. What no one knew then was that the man writhing beneath her wasn't just any drunk, he was the most powerful man in town. And this moment would change Fairhaven forever. Hi everyone. Today we're diving into a story that starts with silence, but ends in the kind of courage that changes an entire town. It begins in a sleepy Ohio suburb, where power hides behind smiles and prejudice whispers through manicured hedges. And it all comes crashing down when one teenage girl, humiliated in front of an entire cafeteria, decides enough is enough. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Let's begin. The road to Fairhaven was quiet, lined with leafless trees and frozen fields, as Jasmine Miles and her mother drove into town with everything they owned packed tightly into the back seat and trunk of a rust-colored Ford Fusion. The gray skies above Ohio didn't promise much, and neither did the cautious glances of the neighbors. When Danielle Miles parked in front of their rented townhouse, one of only 2 units on the block without a flagpole and seasonal wreath. Jasmine, just 15, stared at the rows of nearly identical houses and already knew this wasn't going to be easy. She'd seen it before, the way people paused when they saw her dark skin and cautious posture. Her mother had said it would be different this time, that Fairhaven was quiet, nice, maybe even friendly. But Jasmine had learned long ago that silence in a place like this didn't mean peace. It meant denial. Fairhaven High was a red brick building with polished floors, smiling teachers, and hallways where Jasmine's footsteps always sounded too loud. From the start, she kept her eyes low, spoke only when spoken to, and avoided attention. Her mother's voice echoed in her head every morning before school. Just stay under the radar, Jazz. Please, let this be a clean start. But Chase Rutherford made that impossible. Chase was everything Fairhaven adored. Tall, charming when he wanted to be, always in his red varsity jacket, son of the man whose face was on every billboard for Rutherford Motors. His hair was the color of sand and his smirk permanent. He noticed Jasmine on the first day, not because she stood out, but because she didn't. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She didn't blush when he stared. She didn't play the part. So he gave her one. It started with little things. A shoulder bump that knocked her books to the floor. Loud jokes with friends that referenced city kids and imported trouble. But Fairhaven had a way of pretending everything was fine. Teachers looked the other way. Students giggled nervously and moved on. Jasmine tried to do the same. Until Tuesday. That day the cafeteria hummed with the usual noise: plastic trays, sliding soda cans, cracking open the buzz of conversations Jasmine was never invited into. She sat alone near the windows, peeling back the lid on her thermos of homemade soup. Her mom had packed it with care, just like she always did, chicken and rice, Jasmine's favorite. She was halfway through her meal when Chase's voice cut through the room like a blade. Yo, Chicago, what's for lunch? Urban stew? Laughter erupted from the table nearby. Jasmine didn't respond. He walked over, flanked by 2 other football players. Seriously, what is that smell? Did they run out of food stamps in Chicago? She clenched her jaw and kept her gaze on the soup. Chase leaned in closer, grinning. Come on, say something. Or do you only know how to talk with your fists like all you people? She met his eyes for the first time. Big mistake. Without warning, he grabbed the edge of her tray and yanked it forward. The thermos tipped, flipping over. Piping hot soup poured across Jasmine's lap, soaking through her jeans, steaming up around her in a burst of shock and heat. The cafeteria went still. Then came the laughter. Phones lifted. Snickers. One boy clapped. A girl across the room whispered, "Oh my God!" Jasmine sat frozen, her legs burning, eyes glassy but dry. Chase just stood there smiling, like he'd scored the game-winning touchdown. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just picked up the thermos lid, screwed it back on with trembling fingers, and slowly stood. The soup clung to her pants, dripping down onto the floor in thick, humiliating globs. Nobody helped. Nobody spoke. She walked straight out the cafeteria doors, her head high, but her stomach twisting with 1,000 silent screams. That night her mother saw the red splotches on her legs and asked what happened. "I spilled my lunch," Jasmine replied. Danielle looked at her daughter for a long moment, sensing the truth in the silence but too tired to press. Later alone in her room, Jasmine stared at her closet where her martial arts gear sat buried beneath clothes and school books. Her medals, her GI, even her old mouthguard from Chicago packed and hidden like they didn't exist. She hadn't touched any of it in over a year. That night she lay in bed as moonlight streamed across her face, and for the first time since arriving in Fairhaven, she felt something other than fear. It was fury. Not the kind that burns fast and loud, but the kind that simmers, controlled, precise, waiting. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her old contacts, and found the number she hadn't dialed in nearly 18 months. Coach Ray Vaughn. She hesitated, then pressed call. When his deep voice answered on the second ring, Jasmine took a breath that filled every corner of her chest. "Coach, it's Jasmine. I need your help." Jasmine hadn't said much more than that on the phone. Just that things were bad again. That the town was like the others, maybe worse. Coach Ray didn't ask for details. He never did. He only said, "You still remember how to breathe through the storm." Jasmine nodded into the silence. "Then meet me online tomorrow. 6 p.m. sharp. We'll start with the drills." And that's exactly what they did. Over the next 2 weeks, while Fairhaven slept under layers of polite silence and privilege, Jasmine trained. In the basement, in her room, in the alley behind the community library when no one was watching. It wasn't about fighting. Not really. It was about remembering who she was when all the noise tried to convince her otherwise. Her body remembered quicker than she expected. Coach Ray's virtual voice guided her through every combination, every pivot, every breath. "Don't waste movement," he'd say. "Conserve your power for when it matters." The bruises came back, then faded. The soreness returned to her joints, but so did the clarity. Jasmine wasn't looking for a rematch. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She just knew that something inside her had been broken, and the only way to fix it was to reclaim what she'd buried. By the second Friday after the soup incident, she walked into school with straighter posture. Chase noticed. He wasn't used to her looking him in the eye. At lunch, he swaggered past her table, shoulder bumping hers hard enough to jostle her tray. She didn't flinch, just looked at him, steady cool. He paused, thrown off, then smirked. "You finally gonna bark back, Chicago?" She said nothing. But that night, as the sun dipped low and the hallways emptied, Jasmine waited behind the metal bleachers of the football field. Wind swept through the tall chain-link fence. Her hoodie was pulled up her shoes, silent on the gravel. Chase had laughed when he got the note in his locker. "If you want to show off, let's do it in private. No crowd, just us." 5:30, behind the bleachers. At first he thought it was a joke, a trap maybe. But curiosity mixed with arrogance is a powerful drug, and Chase couldn't resist a performance. He showed up just before sunset alone, the sleeves of his varsity jacket rolled up. "Wow, this is what passes for rebellion now," he called out, spotting her. Jasmine stepped forward slowly. Her hoodie fell back, revealing calm eyes. No anger, no fear. "This isn't rebellion," she said evenly. "It's correction." He barked a laugh. "Correction. You seriously think, what is this? You gonna lecture me into being nice? I'm giving you a chance," she replied. "No cameras, no crowd. You win, and I'll never speak your name again. But if I win, you leave me alone. You tell the school the truth." In front of everyone, Chase scoffed. "You're nuts." She shrugged, then walk away. He couldn't, because deep down Chase was addicted to dominance, addicted to the feeling of power. He was convinced that the girl standing in front of him, quiet, small, with her hands tucked into her sleeves, was bluffing. "All right then," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's go." It happened fast. Too fast for him to even register. Chase lunged all brute force and football season arrogance. Jasmine pivoted like smoke. One fluid step to the left, a sweep of her leg. He stumbled, caught off guard. Then she stepped in, not with fists, not with fury, but with deliberate precision. A feint. A hook to the side, not hard but enough to jolt him. He backed up, jaw clenched. What the hell? Another move. Controlled. Calculated. Coach Ray's voice rang in her mind. Never fight with anger. Fight with clarity. Chase threw a wild punch. Jasmine ducked, It turned his momentum and swept his leg from under him. He hit the ground with a dull thud the wind knocked from his chest. She stood over him, breath even, eyes calm. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, "but I won't be silent anymore." Chase blinked up at her stunned, not just by the physical blow, but by the realization that he had completely underestimated her. "I'm not scared of you," she added softly, "and after tonight, neither will anyone else be." Then she walked away, leaving him on the gravel, the sky dimming above them like the end of a spotlight. What she didn't know was that two students had seen it hidden in the shadow of the stadium wall. They'd filmed it. Not the whole thing, but enough. By Monday morning, the video was already in the air, passed from phone to phone, whispered about in hushed tones between classes. There was no sound in the clip, just a blur of movement. Jasmine ducking and striking, Chase falling hard, then her walking away without a glance back. For once, the gossip didn't mock. It marveled. Chase avoided the cafeteria that day. By Tuesday, the tables had turned, not in outright celebration, but in a kind of quiet respect. And then came the moment no one expected. Lunchtime. Cafeteria full. Jasmine at her usual spot alone. Chase walked in. Every head turned. He stepped up to her table tray in hand, eyes red-rimmed but focused. The room held its breath. "I was wrong," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I treated you like trash. I thought your silence meant weakness. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Jasmine didn't blink, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She just nodded. A ripple moved through the cafeteria. Something intangible, something real. That day, for the first time since arriving in Fairhaven, Jasmine walked out of the cafeteria with something she hadn't felt in years. Dignity. But just when the dust began to settle, a new shadow began to grow. It came not from within Fairhaven, but from a neighboring town where danger didn't hide behind polite grins. It wore jerseys from Westgate High, and it had been watching. It began with whispers, low, cautious voices in the girls' locker room and at the back of the library. Quiet glances shared between the only black girls at Fairhaven High. Jasmine noticed the pattern almost immediately. Kira, Alana, Bree, and Nia, girls she'd seen in the halls, but never truly spoken with, were suddenly always near like shadows, walking the same tightrope she had crossed. One afternoon, as the last bell echoed through the corridors, Kira finally approached. "You got a second?" she asked, voice soft, eyes darting. Jasmine nodded. They led her to a corner behind the school, behind the old art wing, where the walls still bore faded student murals from years ago. There, Kira spoke for the group, her voice trembling with the weight of what she was about to say. "We've got a problem," she said, "and we heard what you did to Chase." Jasmine tensed, but Kira held up a hand. "No, we're not mad. We're grateful. What you did, it gave people like us a little space to breathe. But some boys from Westgate High, they've been showing up." Alana took over. They hang around the bus stop after school. They throw out names. "Ghetto girls. Imports." They talk about reminding us where we belong. Nia bit her lip. "Last week, one of them yanked my backpack off my shoulder and laughed. Said it was a random check." The next day, they followed Bree all the way to her neighborhood. Jasmine's stomach clenched. "And you told the school?" she asked. Kira nodded. "They said they'd look into it. Nothing's changed. They know no one's going to push back," Bree whispered. "We've been quiet, just like you were before." Before the cafeteria, before Chase, before Jasmine remembered who she was. "You want me to talk to them?" she asked, slow and deliberate. "No," Kira said, glancing at the others. "We want you to stand with us when it happens again, because we know it will." The girls looked at her not with desperation, but with hope that made Jasmine's heart ache. She nodded once. "I've got your backs." The next day, the air was sharp and cold. The sky was flat gray, a smear of winter over the distant treetops. After school, the 5 girls walked together toward the bus stop near Jefferson Avenue, where Fairhaven met the edge of Westgate territory. It was a sloped corner with an old wooden bench and a rusty trash can leaning sideways. Too many buses skipped the stop altogether. The streets were quiet until they weren't. They heard them before they saw them. Laughter, footsteps, the unmistakable scuff of 2 big sneakers on the sidewalk. Then they appeared. 5 boys, all wearing Westgate High jackets, all taller, broader, louder. Trent Miller led them. He was 18, blonde, thick-necked, face like a wolf in a Letterman jacket. His father's money lined every real estate sign in 3 counties, and his smirk was worse than Chase Rutherford's had ever been because his cruelty came with no fear of consequence. Well, well, Trent said, strolling up. The princesses of Fairhaven, out for a little field trip. The others chuckled behind him. Trent stepped up to Kira close enough to make her flinch. Heard your little karate queen's been causing waves. Thought we'd come see what all the fuss is about. Jasmine moved without thinking. She placed herself between Kira and Trent, standing square, her eyes calm but burning. Step back, she said quietly. Trent blinked, then laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Hold up. Are you the one? The viral star? The tiny terror? The boy to his right sneered. Thought you'd be taller. Another boy circled around toward Nia. You like being followed, he jeered. Or do you only get mad when we don't bring flowers? Bree stepped closer to the bench, but her hands were shaking. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She simply stepped forward. Leave now, she said. Trent's smile vanished. You think you scare me, he growled. You think a few fancy flips in a grainy video make you untouchable. I don't need to scare you, Jasmine replied. I just need you to choose wisely. Trent's lip curled. Wrong answer. He lunged, but Jasmine was ready. She dropped low and pivoted, letting his momentum drive him past her. One step, one pivot, one well-placed elbow to the ribs, and Trent went crashing into the trash can with a grunt. The other boys froze. One charged. Jasmine sidestepped and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the pavement hard, gasping. Another reached for her arm. She twisted, locking his wrist, redirecting him into the side of the bus shelter. 3 down, 2 left. The silence that followed was deafening. The last 2 boys backed away slowly, eyes wide. One of them stammered, She's crazy, man. Let's get out of here. But Jasmine's voice cut through their panic. Don't come back. Trent groaned from the ground, clutching his ribs. You'll regret this, he spat. No, Jasmine said. You will. Sirens wailed in the distance. A neighbor had clearly called the police. The boys scattered, stumbling over each other as they fled. Kira stared at Jasmine with awe and disbelief. You didn't even hesitate. Jasmine finally let out a long breath, her heart pounding. That's the part they'll never understand. We hesitate every day just to survive. But when we stop, that's when things finally change. The police arrived minutes later. Witnesses, security footage. No injuries requiring an ambulance. Statements were taken, and Jasmine's was clear she never struck first. And every move she made was controlled. The officers nodded. But word travels fast in towns like Fairhaven. And when the Miller family learned what happened to their son, what that girl had done, Jasmine's real trial was just beginning. The Miller family didn't take embarrassment lightly. Richard Miller, Trent's father, was the kind of man who didn't lose not business deals, not elections, and certainly not public perception. The very idea that his son had been taken down by a 15-year-old black girl from Chicago was unacceptable. Within 24 hours of the bus stop incident, Richard had convened his legal team, pulled political strings, and made a single ruthless decision. If we can't win back respect, we'll destroy hers. By Monday, the school was buzzing with rumors. Local papers ran stories with headlines like Violent Confrontation at Bus Stop Raises Questions About Youth Violence and MMA Teen Strikes Again, Hero or Threat. The phrase MMA Teen stuck like glue. It was meant to dehumanize Jasmine, to reduce her to a fighter, not a student. Jasmine sat at her lunch table alone again. Not because people hated her, but because now they feared what being close to her might mean. Parents had started calling the school, some in protest, others in panic. Why wasn't she stopped sooner? Why is a trained fighter walking our halls? What kind of mother lets her daughter behave like this? Even Kira, Alana, Bree, and Nia were pulled aside by teachers and asked gently. Of course, if they had felt pressured to follow Jasmine's lead. One of them, scared for her scholarship, briefly stopped talking to Jasmine altogether. That Friday, Jasmine and her mother received an official notice. A formal complaint had been filed against her in juvenile court, spearheaded by the Millers and supported by an alliance of Westgate and Fairhaven parents. The charge, aggravated assault. Her mother, Danielle, nearly collapsed reading it. They're calling you a criminal, she whispered. They want to ruin your future before you even get one. Jasmine sat quietly at the kitchen table. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. Then I'll fight. But I'm doing it right this time. Danielle looked at her, tears welling. Baby, I don't want them to take you from me. They won't, Jasmine said, rising. Not if I stay in control. She found an attorney the next morning. Ms. Linda Brooks, a seasoned civil rights lawyer in her early 50s, with piercing gray eyes and a voice like polished steel, agreed to take the case pro bono after hearing Jasmine's story. They're not afraid of what you did, Ms. Brooks told her. They're afraid of what you represent. You're a symbol that they don't control the world as neatly as they pretend. The courtroom was packed the day of the hearing. Reporters, parents, students, town officials. Even teachers from Fairhaven High sat stiffly on the benches, eyes flicking between Jasmine and the Millers, like they didn't know which way the wind was going to blow. Trent sat beside his father, Bruce's faded expression blank. But Richard Miller. He looked like a man ready to devour the room whole. When the Miller's attorney, a sleek man in an expensive gray suit, took the floor, his words were razor sharp. Jasmine Miles is not your average 15-year-old. She is a trained combatant, an MMA champion, a known aggressor. What happened at the bus stop was not self-defense. It was an ambush, a display of brute force. He gestured toward Trent. My client has suffered trauma, embarrassment, and physical harm, all provoked by someone who, by her own admission, holds dangerous combat skills well beyond that of any teenager. There were murmurs in the crowd. Cameras flashed. Jasmine sat still. Then it was Ms. Brooks's turn. She rose slowly, calmly. My client is not a threat. She is a protector. A young woman who acted with measured restraint in defense of not only herself, but 4 girls who were being racially harassed and physically threatened. She turned to the judge. Let me be clear. Jasmine Miles did not start that fight, but she ended it with discipline, not violence, with clarity, not chaos. And we have the video evidence to prove it. The courtroom lights dimmed as footage from a security camera across the street played on the screen. The grainy video showed Trent lunging Jasmine, sidestepping a swift block, and then control, not aggression. One by one, the boys attacked. One by one, Jasmine responded, but never with excess. When the footage ended, the courtroom was silent. Next came the witnesses. Kira took the stand first, voice shaking at first, then rising with conviction. They followed us, harassed us. Day after day, the school knew. No one did anything. Jasmine was the only one who stood up. Then came Alana, Bree, and Nia, each sharing their story. Then a teacher from Fairhaven High who reluctantly admitted the school had received prior complaints about Westgate students loitering, but never followed up. Then came Trent himself. When asked whether Jasmine had struck first, he hesitated, then mumbled no. I charged her. Why, Ms. Brooks asked. I got mad. I didn't like the way she looked at me. That sealed it. When Jasmine was asked to speak, she stood slowly facing the courtroom with the quiet dignity she'd carried since day one. I didn't want to fight, she said, but I'm tired of being the one who always has to take the hit and stay quiet. My mom raised me to protect people, and I will not apologize for that. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. When they returned, the judge's voice rang out clear. The jury finds that Jasmine Miles acted in lawful self-defense. No charges will be filed. The courtroom erupted. Ms. Brooks nodded, eyes glistening. Danielle covered her mouth in relief. The girls cheered quietly. But as Jasmine stepped outside into the sunlight, she knew it wasn't over. Because some people can't stand to lose power. And Richard Miller. He wasn't done yet. The courtroom victory felt like a thunderclap. For days afterwards, students of color at Fairhaven High walked the halls just a little taller. Whispers turned into applause. A quiet girl who once sat alone was now someone others looked up to, not because she fought, but because she didn't back down. Teachers who had once looked the other way now nodded to Jasmine with reluctant respect. Even the principal, a man known for avoiding controversy, stopped her in the hallway to say, "You handled yourself with maturity. We're proud of how you carried the school's name." But not everyone shared that pride. Richard Miller didn't just lose a legal case. He lost control. And for men like him, loss feels like betrayal. That night, he didn't go home after court. He went to a bar, then another. Then he sat in the driver's seat of his black Lexus with whiskey on his breath and fury pulsing through his temples. He didn't blame Trent. Not really. His son had inherited that same misplaced confidence. What Richard couldn't accept was that a black girl just 15 had dismantled not only Trent's image, but the illusion of dominance he had built over this town for decades. The more he drank, the more convinced he became that something had to be done. Something personal, something final. 2 nights later, it happened. Jasmine had just finished leading a small, informal self-defense class at the community center. Kira Bree and 2 younger students had stayed behind to help clean up, chatting excitedly about hosting a spring workshop for other girls in town. Jasmine stayed late, wiping mats and locking up gear. She stepped out onto Maple Street around 8:15 p.m. The wind was sharp, her coat hugged tightly around her, and the quiet of Fairhaven at night wrapped around her like a warning. Then she heard the engine, low, slow, following. She glanced back. A luxury car pulled up beside her, tires crunching the edge of the curb. The window rolled down. Jasmine Miles slurred a familiar venom-laced voice. Her breath caught. "Mr. Miller." He stumbled out of the car, eyes red, movements clumsy. "You think you're untouchable now? You think a courtroom makes you bulletproof?" Jasmine backed away slowly, hands up. "I don't want any trouble, sir. Go home." But he was past reason. "You embarrassed my family," he hissed. "Turned my boy into a joke. You'll pay for that." He lunged. What happened next was over in seconds, but captured forever. The convenience store across the street had a high-angle security camera pointed right at the sidewalk. The footage later showed Richard Miller swinging wildly, missing, Jasmine dodging, not retaliating until she was forced to act. A wrist block, a redirection, a shoulder turn that sent him stumbling. Then a textbook takedown that pinned him gently to the ground. She didn't hurt him. She didn't humiliate him. She just stopped him. When the police lights came screaming around the corner 2 minutes later, summoned by a clerk who had seen the whole thing, Jasmine was standing upright, hands visible, waiting. "I didn't strike first," she told the officer. The footage confirmed every word. Richard Miller was arrested for public intoxication, attempted assault, and violating a civil protective order that had been quietly placed following the trial. This time the town didn't hesitate. Even Richard's longtime business partners distanced themselves. News anchors ran headlines like "Young Hero Defends Herself Again, Fairhaven Demands Better." Editorials flooded in praising Jasmine for her restraint and courage. Parents who once avoided eye contact in grocery store aisles now left notes of thanks taped to the community center door. Donations poured in for new mats, gear, and programming. People asked to volunteer. Fairhaven changed, slowly but unmistakably. Fairhaven High formally adopted Jasmine's self-defense and community leadership program as an official extracurricular. Every week, students of all backgrounds attended. Bullied students came to learn. Former bullies came to listen. Even Chase Rutherford showed up quietly, taking a spot near the back. At first, he just watched. But one afternoon after class, he approached Jasmine and said, "If you ever want help organizing, I'll volunteer." "For real?" Jasmine nodded. "We all need second chances." By the time graduation rolled around, the auditorium was standing room only. Jasmine was the class speaker chosen by overwhelming vote. Dressed in her cap and gown, she stepped up to the podium to a sea of cheers. Her mom sat in the front row, crying quietly. Kira Bree and Nia beamed with pride. Even Trent sat in the crowd, eyes down his face, no longer twisted with arrogance, just reflection. Jasmine's voice was steady as she began. "I used to think that strength was something loud, something that cracked through rooms and silenced people. But I've learned that true strength is quiet. It's choosing not to react when your pride is on fire. It's protecting others when no one protects you. And it's standing firm in who you are, even when a whole town tells you to disappear." The room held its breath. "I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of the people I stood up for. And I hope that every single one of you leaves this school remembering one thing. Justice isn't loud. It's not angry, but it never backs down." The ovation was thunderous. Jasmine went on to college out of state studying youth psychology and leadership. But every summer she returned to Fairhaven. And 3 years later, she opened Iron Bloom Academy, a youth leadership and martial arts center built with donations, grants, and the unwavering support of the community she had once been a stranger in. Today, Iron Bloom is a symbol, of unity, of courage, of change. Jasmine Miles didn't just protect herself. She gave Fairhaven the courage to become something better. Stories like Jasmine's aren't just powerful because of what she did, they're powerful because of what she chose not to do. She didn't let her anger define her. She didn't use her strength to dominate even when she had every reason to. Instead, she used it to protect, to lead, and to show others a better way forward. In a world that too often tells young people, especially young black girls, that they need to be quiet to survive, Jasmine proved that silence isn't the only option. But neither is rage. There is a path in between, a path of self-control, purpose, and resilience. One that doesn't just demand justice, but builds it from the inside out. And for those of us watching, listening, reflecting, it's a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it stands alone. But it always leaves a mark. So if you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever been told to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, let this story be your reminder. You don't have to fight to be heard, but when you do choose to stand up, make sure it's with dignity. Make sure it's with purpose. Because real power isn't about putting others down, it's about lifting others up. Thank you for spending your time here with me today. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and never forget, standing up doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you brave.